for the y-axis. And to start out with, I'm going to draw the normal sine graph, and then I'm going to transform it, and I want you to try and figure out what each of the letters are doing. So now you see on the graph, this is the graph that we're going to start with. We've already shown it on the previous one. This is just the normal sine graph. Notice how the amplitude is 1, because the mountains are 1 unit high and 1 unit low. The period, or the cycle, is 2 pi, because in order for me to see one mountain and one valley, it takes 2 pi units. What happens when I do this? What's happening to the graph?
It stretches vertically.
Okay, let's use some words that I've already talked about.
A is 2.
What?
A is 2.
A is 2, I like that. Amplitude changes. It's 2. Okay, so the letter A has been changed. It is the amplitude that is changing. Here we go again. What's that going to do? Flip it, just like every other graph we've ever done with a negative in front. All it does is flip it. So this negative sign is actually associated with the A because it's -1. So I'm just going to go like this. So now in the orange graph on the board, we have y equals sine x plus 1. What do you think happened to that graph?
It goes up. It shifts up 1.
Shifts up 1. So now, I look like this. Remember, everything's being compared to the red graph. The red graph is the original sine graph. So everything is compared to the red. What I want you to notice is that that letter was letter D, as in duh. And maybe you don't know this, but I use the word midline. Because if I look at the black x-axis, everybody take a look, stop writing for a second. Look at the black x-axis. You see the red graph go above a mountain and below a valley off of the black x-axis. That whole axis has now shifted up 1 unit. And if you look at the green dashed line now, kind of your new x-axis, the orange graph is 1 unit above and 1 unit below that new midline, 1 unit above where it was before. Now start writing again. In this next one, I have the following. Y equals the sine of 2x. Watch carefully. Notice that in the normal red sine graph, stop talking, thank you, that it took 2 pi to get done when you had y equals sine x. Now that you have y equals sine of 2x, you're getting done with 1 mountain and 1 valley in pi for the period. You're finishing your mountain and valley in half the time because you're going twice as fast. That b that you see with the x affects your period or your cycle speed. So the number there is affecting it.
Oh, I get it now.
The b affects the period. And I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. Hey. Last one. And then we're going to do something special.
Take a nap?
You can definitely do that. That says x minus pi over 2 in the parentheses. And here's what happens. Shh. Look at the red graph, and then look at the pink graph. What happened from the red to the pink? Shifted forward pi over 2. The stuff in the parentheses shifted the graph pi over 2 to the right. Or just pi over 2 would be fine to say. The way that you find your shift, because shift happens, is you set the stuff inside the parentheses equal to 0. And the c specifically, of course, is affecting that shift, but it's actually all of it. So if I set the x minus pi over 2 equal to 0, the thing that makes that 0 is pi over 2. That's why I've shifted everything pi over 2. So if you pull out your packet, you'll notice that there's a box on the second side that has some important information. And I want to remind you that we were talking about y equals a sine parentheses bx plus c plus d. They might have minus c in there, I don't know. They have minus c, whatever, it doesn't really matter. We'll be fine. And I want to remind you that certain things have to do with certain things. So, first of all, the A was pertaining to your if you can't answer that, you're probably going to bomb this test. Amplitude. Get a clue. Doesn't matter what day it is, get a clue. This has to do with your mountains and your valleys. Sarah, what else did it have to do with?
Your A? It could make it negative. Right?
Different word, 4 letters.
Upside down. Upside down.
Thank you. Flip was the word I was looking for. Upside down is a 4-letter word. The B. Taylor. What did the B affect? Jennifer. The cycle speed I would take or the period. So you can say either one, your cycle or your period. Either one. They use both words for that. The C and the parentheses together affect something called your phase shift. That means how far you went to the right or to the left. So if you set that parentheses equal to 0, you will find out which way your graph moved and how much. If when you set the parentheses equal to 0, you get a number like pi over 3, that means you went pi over 3 to the right. If you get something like negative pi over 6, that means you went pi over 6 to the left. And the last thing that we talked about is the D. And I said the D affected what I call the midline. Or maybe what some people might say is the new x-axis. There's one other thing I wanted to point out. In general, the normal window is from 0 to 2 pi, and you go up by pi over 2, and those are for your x's, and then the y values are from negative 1 to 1. Now you will have to adjust this based on what's going on. So like when we do zoom 6 for a y equals graph, it always goes from negative 10 to 10x, negative 10 to 10y. I'm telling you the zoom 6 for periodic functions, sines and cosines, is from 0 to 2 pi, go up by pi over 2, and negative 1 to 1. Stay going up by 1. And if your amplitude is more than that, or if you shifted things up or down, you might have to stretch your window a little bit to see more.